Okay, gentlemen, I've titled today's class session, hopefully not lecture, Event Evangelism. And there are different, events that I've got listed, and we'll get into why I think they're effective, or maybe we can discuss if they are still effective. And they are, for example, tragedy events. When there's something that is going on. I remember when 9/11 happened. I mean, I preached on it right after that. And I mean, we had visitors at church because of 9/11. You can have, man-made created events like gospel meetings or revivals or things like that. Local events, festivals. We've done our Bible Jeopardy for basically 15 years here at this congregation. We've had baptisms from it. And then calendar events. We've talked a little bit about this, but I'm a big advocate that if something is on the calendar and it's on people's minds, then it's useful and wise to use those events, such as for 25 years, from Mother's Day to Father's Day, I preach on family moral issues. And, here at this congregation at Winston, that was one of the favorite series that I did. And people really appreciated it. Now, most people, I don't think, have a problem with preaching about mothers on Mother's Day or fathers on Father's Day. But I will also preach on the birth of Jesus on the Sunday that's closest to December 25th. I don't call it a Christmas sermon, but I will preach on that topic, because if somebody shows up, then that's probably, if they're a visitor, what they are expecting. And if you don't preach on it, and I know a lot of preachers think it is unwise to do so, I would suggest to you another possible unwise result of that is they might think, wait, are you Jehovah's Witnesses? Because they don't celebrate Christmas either. So either way you go, you can upset people, confuse people. And so I would rather use that as an event. Now, those are 4 types of events: calendar events, local events, created events, and tragedy events. Can y'all think of any other kind of event besides those 4 that I could add to my list?
Well, here we put on the calendar before in the past that we're going to have a special day for guests. It was not a one already on the calendar, but invite a friend day. We're going to have sermons and songs that will encourage your neighbor or friend.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So a friend day. So we got calendar events, local events, created events, tragedy events. Friend day, that could be under created event also. Anybody else got created events? Welcome, Royce. My buddy who said, take over for me, and now is off my prayer list. No, just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, please not.
Can I throw something out there, Perry?
Go for it.
Joyful events. I've seen that when somebody comes to the Lord, this family member, they end up bringing their spouse or their older son or daughter or their best friend to Christ as well. Sometimes a joyful event causes a chain reaction that brings somebody else to Christ or to the church.
Yeah, that's good too. Okay, now those are 5 different types of events: calendar events, local events, created events such as Friend Day, tragedy events, and joyful events. And I've got in the introduction of my notes, why event evangelism? Because people might say, well, we're supposed to be doing evangelism all the time. Now we could add, another type of event evangelism, and that is what San Bernardino has been doing for years now, inviting people. You can add another type, and that is door knocking, which is something that is in a book that I just bought on 3 techniques that you can use in evangelism. And so that's an event that you could say is a created event, but it's a specific one. And, I would suggest that when you do, door knocking, we can maybe have a whole session on that, you go around and ask people what you can pray for them concerning, instead of just, asking them to, come to church. But why do I think event evangelism is an important way to proceed in getting the congregation involved? Because that's one thing that we've talked about again and again and again. How do we get other people involved? Well, why event evangelism? Well, let me ask you a question. When you were in school, why did you study?
Well, I personally studied to learn and grow and develop, but also so I could pass my grades and get my certificate.
Yeah, Joseph, I'll say the first part of that, so you can personally grow and learn, is not why most kids study. I can say that's not why I studied. I studied so I could pass. And when did you study the hardest?
Right before the test.
Right before the test, that's correct. Now, why did you study right before the test? Because the test is, what am I going to call the test? It's a what?
An event?
An event. So what motivates us to study for a test, or to do a book report, or in business, what helps people get prepared, or in music, what motivates musicians to practice even harder, is deadlines or an event, because deadlines are caused by events. And most people, they wouldn't practice as hard in music if there wasn't a concert coming up, or if they were getting ready to do a solo. I had to do a solo in high school every year as part of my grade. I practiced extra hard for that. So deadlines for events, whether the event is a test, a meeting, a concert, or whatever, help us to get organized and motivated. And if this is part of, we'll just call human nature, I would suggest the same mentality could exist and be utilized for personal evangelism. That we give people a deadline. That is an event. This is going to happen on this day. We want you to invite somebody, or come to the building, or meet us here, whatever it is, because you've given somebody what I call in my notes, in event mentality. Now, that might be an immature mentality, because, well, we should study all the time just to learn and increase ourselves in knowledge and to become personally better, but we don't. Most of us study even harder because of the test that's coming up. We should do evangelism all the time. We don't need an event to do evangelism. True, we don't need one. But the question is, does having one help us? I'm not saying this is the only way to do evangelism. I'm not even saying it's the best way to do evangelism. I'm saying it is a way to do evangelism. So, what are your thoughts so far on my explanation of event evangelism? Any thoughts?
I like the accountability aspect. It really
Yeah, me
makes
too.
Okay, explain accountability aspect.
well, if somebody's getting out there and going door knocking, and there's other members being invited, people feel like, well, the different church members are doing this. They're trying to grow their church, and they kind of feel like, well, this is something I should be supporting if I'm part of this church. It gives an impetus for people, even shy people, to step up. There was a woman at a church I was at, and she was so shy. She's never went door knocking, but she saw the events taking place, and she was encouraged, and she started getting into the work and getting her comfort levels built up, and she became a very hard worker. And so it's kind of, those are opening doors, those events for people to step through and help out. But that impetus is, when they got this event before them, is to, when they see it, they feel accountable to be a part of it because they see this thing taking place.
Another way of putting that would be a phrase I've started to use lately called positive peer pressure. We normally think of peer pressure as something that's negative, but the Bible often talks about peer pressure in the sense of encouraging one another. And that's positive peer pressure. Okay, here, I'll give you my definition of an event from my notes. Something that happens at a given place and time. A special set of circumstances. In that event, the first possibility is, you give people, like we talked about, a deadline. And so that's the definition of event, something that is planned on a specific time, on a specific date. The power of an event is, well, you gave one, accountability, positive peer pressure. And I am taking notes as we go. Now, events give us incentive based upon two realities. It gives us something to say and a time it needs to be said. And that meets two objections that people have when they say, I don't know what to say, or I hadn't thought of something to say, didn't know when to say it. So if you tell people that there is an event, and we talked about different kinds, it tells people what to say. And it puts them on a deadline, and also gives the people that they're inviting a deadline also. So those are two, what I call power of the event. Now, everyone has a theory on how evangelism is best done. And since I'm part of everybody, I've got a theory too. And that is, there is no best method on how evangelism is done. Evangelism methods are as varied and as effective as each individual. And I think that when we individualize our story to people, that helps them. But one event that was the most common is now kind of going away. And so I want to talk about that.
Hey, could I interject something, Barry, too, real quick here?
No, George, you may not.
Yes, sir. Sorry. I'll throw the video. No, I'm just thinking also about the what you talked about the power of event.
So much for
Yeah, there you go. It gives me a target also. And also it takes advantage if you're talking about the calendar events such as around Christmas or Easter. It also gives me an opportunity to speak to an audience that I most likely will have.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm seasoned I'm on the occasion. And I've always tried to have that target, wrong about Christmas and Easter, have something that would be appropriate for a visitor that I can connect with, something they may agree with, and then add some things that they need to think about. So it's good for me because it gives me a target. And also, you want to speak to the audience. Well, here's your opportunity. So anyway.
Well, can you think of biblical examples where?
Well, Jesus, absolutely. Paul went to synagogue.
Yeah. Going to synagogue, the Sabbath was an event. And Paul took advantage of that.
Paul did it every Saturday.
Yeah. You also have during the Feast of Dedication, if you study what Jesus said in John that surrounds that, he is talking about topics that happened during the Feast of Dedication. So you see a lot about water and light in those sections because water and light were a big part of that celebration. And you could even argue, well, the Feast of Dedication was not orchestrated by God, but Jesus still took advantage of that event, that calendar event. Acts chapter 2. That's not a calendar event, it's a tragedy event. And Peter and the rest of the apostles took that event, the crucifixion of Jesus, which was on the minds of these people, because it happened just 50 days before, and used that. So there are biblical examples of what I call event evangelism. So good thought, George, even though you are not supposed to be talking, but
I'll put me on mute.
No, I need all the talking I can get because I was asked to do this at the last minute.
Incidentally, sorry about that, Barry.
Hey, you can't help it.
I intended to send it to you last night. Anyway, let me make an observation. I love the approach you guys are taking to this. Rare indeed is the evangelism opportunity that is not ultimately event-based. There are some of us who it's just integral to who we are. Joseph is, among the best, and he goes and he does, but he doesn't depend upon an event. However, he mobilizes people for those events. I think it's probably true that it would be a rare church indeed where any kind of a focused evangelism effort didn't take place that wasn't event-based. It's just difficult to fathom. I know in over 50 years of preaching, getting the church involved into something it relates to event-based evangelism. There were a few along the way that I've worked with and who went with me just simply because they had that interest. I think of some of the ladies that went with me, who were involved in the whole evangelism concept within their own minds, but it didn't require an event other than just the fact that I was going to go, and so they would go with me. But by and large, when the church gets involved in something, it's because it's event based. It's it's tragic that it's that way, but it is just so. And I'll back away here.
Well, like I said earlier, it goes right along with what you're talking about, Royce. It might be an immature mentality, but it's a reality that we respond to events. We've done it in school. When a test comes, that's when we study. When we have to do a solo in band, that's when we practice, so on and so forth. Now, what event do you think decades ago, half a century ago, a century ago, was maybe longer than that, was the most effective and well-known type of event evangelism?
Gospel meeting.
Gospel meeting.
Cane Ridge.
Yep.
I just dated myself.
You
Yeah.
did. You did. You were
I think
there.
that was way back.
Yeah, he was there, so he knows. Now, gospel meetings decades ago, they would last one entire week, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. And most gospel meetings now are weekends.
Yeah.
Now, the question I want to ask is, have gospel meetings lost their effectiveness, or do we need to change how we do gospel meetings? Now, while you're thinking on that, I will suggest to you 2 reasons why gospel meetings in the past were so effective. And that is, one, people didn't have much of anything else to do other than work. And so, it was kind of like a break. It was also a social event. And so gospel meetings were an event. So do you think that gospel meetings are still valid today? If they are, why? If they are not, what can we do to make them more of a event evangelism? So go.
For me, let me just throw this out there. Royce Bell, for many years, has had preachers come up to his church and give sermons and lessons about evangelism to the church members to inspire them. And then not only that, he also mentioned that if you just have a preacher up to talk about evangelism and not show people, get them out in the streets, you're not really integrating them into the work and getting them immersed into the process. So after he gets some preachers up there to do evangelism and gospel meetings, he has them get out there into the work, and he encourages the process, the people to get out there into the field with the evangelists. And some older ladies, some guys from church I've seen through the years get out there. Larry has gotten out there, but the genesis is the gospel meeting. But the problem is with too many gospel meetings, it's all rhetoric and not much anything else.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. One of the benefits of bringing preachers in has been give them an opportunity to talk to the church about evangelism. Their perspective may be entirely different than my perspective. And I know members at San Bernardino have said, they really enjoy hearing these other preachers. But, gospel meetings 20 years ago probably became, maybe even a little longer, they became occasions to preach to the choir. And that's really all it was. And I love gospel meetings, but I don't like holding gospel meetings. That's why I don't hold gospel meetings anymore. If I'm going to go somewhere, I go to make it an evangelism event. And that's just my own shift. Now, a lot of preachers don't like that. They don't get the concept, but it can be a blast, because what's interesting is, because I can do that, because I do that, members of the church will often do that, will often join me, like in coffee shop evangelism. I'll just say, hey, I'm gonna be at such and such coffee shop tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. If you guys like to meet me down there. It's kind of interesting. The preachers come begrudgingly, and members of the church come and they love it, and because I think there's probably a deep-seated realization in the part of many members of the church, we really need to be doing evangelism. We need to be involved in this type thing. I'd like to, give me some ideas on gospel meetings, Barry.
Well, one, I got from you is you spend the week before the gospel meeting out on the streets, on the college campus, in the coffee houses.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's a different way to do a gospel meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of having the preacher come in on Saturday and preach from Sunday to Friday,
Exactly.
or
That's the preparation. Yeah, that's the preparation for the church. That's setting the church up for that. Inviting people inviting people we meet on the street to an opportunity to study like that. That's just preparation.
I would say it's probably, preparation, as you said, for the church, but also for the community. But I have gone out to Sturgis, Mississippi, 2 or 3 times. And this is the way that they do their gospel meetings. They work incredibly hard.
Yeah.
The first gospel meeting I held there, they had 100 visitations to that gospel meeting.
Wow.
And when I say visitations, I don't mean 100 different visitors, but they had 100 people who were not part of that congregation visiting. So the same person might visit twice or 3 times. That would be, 3 visitations. So they got out in the streets. Michael Hurst is really good. He goes to places that, he's made contacts with. And I've never been part of a congregation that had that many visitations in 1 week. But the last time I was there, one of the other things, I've done this both times I was there. Michael Hurst invites me to go along with him. He's already invited these people, but now he wants to introduce me to these people.
Right.
And so I'm not, staying in
That's
a home.
That's because he doesn't want to scare them when they show up at night.
That's right. And what they do that's also interesting is the Sunday sermons are aimed at the church, but Monday through Friday are aimed at evangelism.
Yeah.
So they actually, split it up.
Yeah.
And
Preach to the center. Preach to the center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think that, when you have a gospel meeting, you need to decide beforehand what type of gospel meeting is this going to be? I have no problem whatsoever with a gospel meeting just being building up the local congregation or building up, Christians. So decide ahead of time. Go for it, George.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the things that we did is we invited David Banning. I don't know if you guys know him or ever heard the story of when he was a very young man just getting started preaching and had given an assignment to go to the state penitentiary in Huntsville to speak with a young man that was on death row. And long story short, this young man had murdered a convenience store operator, had been a Christian, raised by his grandfather, and had a story to tell of his regret for what he had done, and penitence, and wanted to get the story out. So David would go around and use this lesson in churches. Well, we had him come, and as a part of the meeting, he spoke and offered that lesson and story here at the church. But we also rented a room on campus, and we canvassed the campus with flyers and brochures and did everything we can to let people know that there was going to be an event on campus where he was going to be speaking. And I was a little disappointed in the result, but I think we had 9 students show up, which, hey, you got 9, but they were all criminal justice students, and they were interested in, more or less the legal aspect of it than they were the spiritual aspect, but at least they heard, so you can have your meeting if you want, but also, maybe take advantage of a place off campus. He spoke at the university. I had him speak at 2 of the public schools, which I was really surprised. And also the Gary Job Corps, where, you have underprivileged children, troubled children. He spoke at the Job Corps. So we had him not only here at the church, but in the community. So
That's a great way to do event evangelism, and that is do it off campus, in that sense, off the property of the church.
Right.
Another way to utilize event evangelism, or in reference to gospel meetings, is you get a topic that is a hot topic of that day. And I'll give you an example. Bob Buchanan used to go around the country and do gospel meetings on Satanism. And I've had him twice at congregations do that. One up in Caneyville, Kentucky, and another one in Boca Raton, Florida. And in Boca Raton, we advertised it to the point where we had Satanists attend.
Yeah.
So, pick something that's, going to get people there. Now, the danger of that is you can turn it into, how can I say this? You can turn it away from what it needs to be, because ultimately every needed topic out there should be centered around Jesus and not just become a how-to. You can do, classes, and we've done this where we went to a community center and we had classes on the family. And, that's something that I want to do again. Now, I will say it was not very successful, but that's because the community center promised to put up flyers for us, and they never did. And so I decided, if I ever do that again, I'm putting up the flyers.
You got to put up your own.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was something that I learned. and, to canvas, that particular neighborhood. So one way to make gospel meetings more successful is don't do it in the church building always. Pick a topic that is a hot topic of the day, but don't turn it into just a how-to book. It's got to be ultimately about Jesus. Because if you just turn it into how to be a better person, how to have a better marriage, you're turning the gospel into a philosophy instead of a gospel.
Joseph, have you guys been able there to successfully transition back to a gospel meeting model of evangelism at all?
They got a new evangelist, JP Flores. He's in his late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, we know.
They are actually having a workshop every month with the congregation, but it's clever in how they're doing it. They're also inviting preachers to share evangelism tips, and they're inviting church members from other churches can come and hear the content as well. So it's a very organic way they're going about it. They're trying to make it a part of the cycle of the church, but they're trying to get other people implemented into the work as well, sharing it with other people. They got it on video and they record it in their congregations during their events.
And he's at Northside? Where you?
He's at the University Church of Christ.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Steve Patton preaches there.
Okay. Yeah, we know JP. I think we got him started out here. I thought maybe Perry might have worked with him.
I did.
Perry with him, but anyway.
Yeah, he had on funky shoes. I remember him.
That's a long story. Boy, I'll tell you, Leon Hall had time of that, but he was at Studebaker Road. I think he did a good work at Studebaker Road. I was a little surprised he left, but Studebaker Road has always been a more cosmopolitan church, and JP strikes me as a little more, no pun intended, a feet on the ground, kind of a preacher. So, but
yeah, he's a lot like you. He's a pit bull.
Anyway.
Of course, all the men in this all of you guys are very proactive, not
yeah.
Which is awesome.
All right. Well, I'm interested in seeing how some churches are realizing, losing gospel meetings that's been a big loss to us, because we've lost the force of the gospel meeting as an event, and there's so many churches are so frustrated about it. We've struggled with it, trying to come up with a workable solution for it. So I'd love to see what Steve and JP are able to do there.
One reason why I think that gospel meetings have lost their effect is it's too preacher focused instead of congregation focused.
Right.
And
you're probably right about that, but that's kind of been the it was about the high powered that came in. You had the Roy Cogdell come in, or you had the Foy Wallace, or you had the D Bowman, or guys like Leon Odom, guys like who were just remarkably talented meeting preachers. And no one has excelled D in that regard. Even when D's material was being done for the church, it was beneficial to people who were not in Christ. D had the ability to to just really bring his heart to those that were there. I think he's among the best I ever heard.
Here's
Well,
another-
it just seems
Go ahead, George.
for us, it's been hard to get people here. I know a few years ago, we invited someone to come and do a series on evidences. And, we covered the campus and advertised in the paper, and we had one person show up, and he was a heckler. At least he showed up, and he wanted to hand out his propaganda. I still have his little pamphlet he was handing out called the HOLEY Bible.
Yeah.
And, he was wanting to try to, find some converts at church, but, it was disappointing. Because we really, really worked hard to get some to come, and only one guy shows up. And we thought we had as you said, a hot topic. This will be a hot topic on the campus.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
I would suggest another way to make gospel meetings more effective is we need a deeper understanding of what the gospel is. And what I mean by that is too often we think of the gospel is, well, you got to hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized. That's the plan of salvation. No, that is not the plan of salvation. The plan of salvation is Jesus. Hearing, believing, repenting, confessing, be baptized is my response to the plan of salvation. And if you want a deeper understanding of the gospel, then look at the first half of many of the books that Paul writes. Colossians chapter 1 and 2. That's about the gospel.
That's
3
the gospel.
Yeah. 3 and 4 is the application.
Yeah.
And then you got to make the application connected to the gospel.
Yeah. Ephesians 1 and 2 also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're not, and this is a sad commentary, and you can disagree with me if you want. I don't think that we focus enough on what the gospel is, because we're focusing on what people have to do to respond to it.
Well, I agree with that.
And maybe if we were preaching the gospel deeper and more biblically centered, that itself would appeal to people who are non-believers and believers, because even those letters that Paul wrote, he was writing to Christians. Christians need to be focused on what the gospel is. And then remember, I told you earlier that we can't make these just like a how-to book. One thing that I have changed in my approach to studying is I grew up never hearing a lot of things. And one of the things that I never heard was how, for example, Ephesians 3, 4, 5, and 6 are connected to 4, 5, and 6 are connected to Ephesians 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
In other words, I would read commentaries. I would hear preachers saying, well, now that Paul's done with that, he goes on to some practical things that the church needs to hear. And the problem with that is those practical things are part of the gospel that he's already written about, but now he is showing how to live the gospel. And so if we're going to make gospel meetings more effective, let's emphasize the gospel in gospel meetings.
Yeah.
Now, y'all have any other ways to make gospel meetings more effective as an event? We talked about 1, make it a hot topic. 2, do it off the premises. And 3, a deeper understanding of what the gospel is, because that will hopefully show people what they need.
you wrote an exceptional article about the majority of people they don't believe in God anymore. They're drifting away. There's less, quote, believers and unbelievers. And you mentioned that to really bring people in, you got to get them to first believe that there is a God. So to start the Genesis, to get people, college students especially, that they're wanting to learn about creation and evolution and the proof that there's a God, evidences. So that might be a good draw for college campuses and even for a meeting at the church as well, to share something that is a very hot topic. It may get hot responses from different people, but a very big issue in our day and age in America.
Yep.
Do you guys do Twitter?
Yeah, a little bit.
I follow a lady who's an astrophysicist, and she talks about she studies. She's an astrophysicist at UT Austin. I think that's where she is. But anyway, she studies black holes. That's her realm of study. But she's a converted atheist. She was raised what she calls the capital A atheist. Her name is Sarah Salviander, Salviander, Sarah Salviander. She is absolutely awesome. I'm not sure what church she's with there in the Austin area. I'm hoping when we get there, I'm hoping to meet her and spend some time and talk with her. But boy, she just attacks these positions of atheism. She's doing it from a perspective of being an atheist and having been raised in an atheist environment. And she's now married to a guy who's now a believer, who was formerly an unbeliever. You may recognize the name Salviander as being Finnish, and they are in fact. I guess her husband is originally from Finland, but she's recently addressed some things just really, really interesting. Then I would recommend you take a look at her, Sarah Salviander. She wrote an excellent book too. So anyway.
Well, that brings us to another point: how to make a gospel meetings more effective. And that is, we need to come at these topics not just from a biblical perspective, but from a perspective that the world will understand.
Oh yeah.
For example, we did some topics recently here at Winston-Salem. Social topics like transgenderism, homosexuality,
right,
and so forth. And I think I've talked about this book before. This one is Love Thy Body by Nancy R. Piercy. She used to be an atheist also. And her explanation of the mindset
right,
of people who are involved in all of these things, I mean, it was totally unexpected. And, I thought, well, it's because everybody's focusing on the body. Well, the reality is they're not focusing on the body. But you'd have to see her argument to, understand that. The reason why is you're not going to convince anybody that they're wrong unless you first understand how they are wrong. And then they can hear how they are wrong. So getting up there and just quoting the Bible, that worked 50 years ago, because 50, 75, 100 years ago, back Cane Ridge, where Royce was, we know that those people believed in the Bible.
yeah.
Nowadays, most people don't believe in the Bible, So you've got to come at them from their perspective. And we have a great biblical example of that. Acts chapter 17, where Paul doesn't quote the Bible, he's quoting people that they knew. So I'll close with this. 3 reasons why people accept invitations to our event evangelism. 1, they come because of a need. 2, they come because of a friend. And 3, they come because it's an event.
I'm doing
Yep.
broadcast.
So that's some of my notes on event evangelism. You guys got any closing questions, comments, or disagreements?
Can I ask a question about Clinty France? I know he runs Facebook ads to get Bible studies. Would that work in the same way to get people to come to church? Or, I mean, I know we're getting ready to close up, but have you guys had any experience with gospel meetings and doing social media? Like, has Clinty France talked about that? I mean,
Who, Joe? I mean, yeah, Joseph, who?
Clinty France, am I saying his name
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Clinton
yeah,
de France.
Clinton de France, yeah. Clinton's a pretty good friend. I haven't talked to him in a number of months, but I'll just tell you something. I think Facebook is the best opportunity in a lifetime in terms of targeting ads, focusing on people. It's a great opportunity. You can focus it. Your ads are targeted. People are getting your ads that are interested in them. I haven't talked to Clinton in, I don't know, several months about ads like that, but there are a number of brethren that are using Facebook ads to generate Bible studies, and it's not just Clinton. So,
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of success. I've tried some, but I do know that church in Georgia, especially early, mid-March 2020, when COVID was really hitting and people were being told to segregate and stay at home and all of that, they reached out on Facebook and hey, we know you're in a crisis. We're here to help. God has answers. And they were very successful in getting Bible studies that way.
and they were doing with online Bible studies too.
Yeah, they were doing Zoom. They were on, just hey,
Right.
we'll meet you on Zoom.
They embraced Zoom. Yeah.
You could also use meetup.com. Then that's another way to do an event, because it's scheduled and people show up. We've been doing coffee house evangelism for probably 3, 4, 5 years here.
Yeah.
And it's, again, people from church come, people from the neighborhood come, because people are looking for ways to be socially involved. If you don't think that's true, then meetup.com would fail totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you go on meetup.com, you'll just be shocked at how many different groups there are out there. People are looking for social interaction. And that's just another event that you can create. We talked about created events.
Yeah, one other thing I might add to improving gospel meetings, sometime we need to prepare the brethren for it. Hey, we're talk it up. We're going to have it. Why are we having it? You guys probably already do that, but I was thinking, and this goes back a ways back. I don't know if Royce, you ever knew William S. Irvin. That was Nancy's grandfather. He was originally at Studebaker
Yes.
Road ago, but I was looking through some of his old outlines, and he had why it was.
He was also at Venice
Yeah, for a while. They said, why have a gospel meeting? And he wrote GM, gospel meeting. And he had God, error, sinner, error, and gospel. You know, what is a gospel meeting? It's a meeting of God and the sinner and God, you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
the gospel.
Yeah.
So the message.
That was Bud Urban's dad.
Yeah, that was
Boy,
Bud Urban's dad.
do I go back a long ways. I knew Bud Urban at Crescent Park back in the 50s.
You do go a ways back.
Yeah. Yeah. And but William S. Irvin was at Venice.
Yeah.
And was still deeply respected by members at the time there. Anyway,
I'll
think I'm getting-
suggest one more way to improve gospel meetings, and that is stop calling them gospel meetings when you're advertising them.
There you go. Yeah.
I was doing door knocking and I said, we're getting ready to have a gospel meeting. They said, what's that? I said, oh, it's a revival. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard one old preacher, and I use old in the sense of he was physically old and his attitude was kind of old. And he wrote an article on we should not call gospel meetings revivals. And then he said, although it's scriptural to do so, we shouldn't do it. And
Because
because they use that term, I guess. But then he gave this, and I'll never forget this. He said, and besides that, a church cannot be revived with just one sermon. And I was thinking, well, maybe your preaching might not be able to, but God's word can. So, you don't have to call it a gospel meeting. You don't even have to call it a revival. You can call it a lecture, or
Yep.
you can just call it whatever, be creative, just whatever you think that people might respond to.
Let me just mention, George, we've been sidelined here with COVID, and so we're spending money that we don't really have.
Okay. Hey, Royce.
But yeah.
I'm going to, just before you go into that, I'm just going to stop recording, okay?
Okay.
Okay, just a second.